Hi, this is Kate from IndonesianDiscovery.net. Rudy's been telling you in his last vlogs about all the things that happened with the eruptions last October, November 2010. All the people who were affected, had to evacuate, had their houses destroyed, how he helped some of them, and so on. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience. Rudy and I share a house with our office and also with 2 other employees. So it's a pretty big house. And we knew that Merapi was quite active and that things were getting a little bit scary. But in any case, on the evening of November 5th, we all went into our bedrooms and went to sleep and so on. And then a little bit after midnight, there was a phone call. It was one of our other employees asking us if we were okay. And I said yes, and he said things, we were supposed to evacuate, he thought, and so forth, but I said, we'll see. In any case, I went out on the terrace and I saw that it was ash coming down. Well, we'd had ash a couple of times coming down before, and I wasn't too worried about that. And then I called another friend in the area who lives nearby and asked her what she thought. And the general consensus was that we would wait and see. So we hung up the phone, and within a few minutes I heard something on the roof. And I thought, what in the world is that? And I went out on the terrace, and what I saw coming down now was not just ash. It was ash mixed with sand and rainwater. And you know, that kind of combination can make a kind of cement. And so it was pretty scary, and I said to everyone, okay, we better go now. So Rudy got on his motorbike and he went off on his own. The other 2 employees, Sunny and Mahfoud, and I got in the car with my 4 dogs. Luckily I've got a minivan because 3 of my dogs are Dalmatians, and they're not huge, but still fairly big dogs. We didn't take anything with us because we were sure the next morning we'd be coming back home. So we only took my purse, Sunny took her purse, that was about it. And we started heading out. We got on the main road, and we were not the only ones on the main road. It was jammed full of cars, people who had the same realization that it was time to leave. And so it was dead still traffic jam. And I was using the windshield wiper fluid to clear the window, and of course that ran out in about 10 minutes because this ash and sand coming down was totally blinding me. And Mahfoud, since we were pretty much stopped in traffic most of the time anyhow, Mahfoud would get out, and we had an empty water bottle. He'd fill up the water bottle with some dirty water from the ditch and pour it over the windshield, and then I'd be able to see a little bit out the windshield. So what normally would take us about 10 minutes took about an hour and a half, maybe a little more. And it was really very scary because we never knew, is Merapi going to blow even more? Are we going to be hit? We can't get anywhere. We're going so slowly. Could we become victims in the eruption that might happen, and so forth? Well, we didn't know it at the time, but Merapi was really erupting. But of course, as usual, the lava was going to the southeast, and the area that we live in, which is usually considered a safe zone, remained relatively safe, basically, only with this ash and sand stuff. So we got to a certain point where the police were blockading the road and said that we had to turn left and go off on some of the smaller roads. So we did that, and we had to stop. We had to get some water and clean the windshield better, and so we found a place to pull over, and Mahfoud ran off to there was a water faucet there, and Sunny said, you know, this is a pretty good place. We should just stay here for the rest of the evening, or the rest of the night rather, and because we knew we were going home in the morning, so we decided to stay there. It was a place where we could pull the car completely off the road. It was a place that had a bamboo bench out in front of a little stand that sold satay. And there were some posts there where we could tie the dogs up if they got restless being in the car too long. So I said, fine, that's perfect. Now, on the way coming down to that spot, I had called another person who used to work for me. His name is Tarto. And I had called him and asked him if he knew of any place we could go. And he didn't at the time, but in any case, while we were stopped at this spot, thinking we were going to spend the rest of the night there, Tarto called back and said he had found an empty house in the neighborhood where he lived, and he had woken up the watchman in the middle of the night and asked if we could stay there, and he had said yes. So he had a place for us to stay. Amazing, huh? In the middle of the night, my friend finds us a place where we can stay, theoretically just for that night, and go home the next day. So we got back in the car and continued on down, and Tarto met us at a particular intersection, and we followed him to the house. And the watchman said, don't worry, this house is empty, it's been empty for a long time. He actually watches 2 or 3 empty houses in the neighborhood, and the landlady never comes around, so don't worry. Okay, so we went in. It was totally empty, not a stick of furniture, not a stove, not a fridge, nothing. But in any case, it was a perfect place for us to stay. It was a very nice house, and it even had a fenced-in yard so the dogs could run around a little bit. So we passed the rest of the night there, and in the morning I said, well, we better get some stuff, because we heard via the grapevine that we weren't going to be allowed to go home that day. So I went out and bought some cheap mattresses and a cheap table, cheap folding chairs and stuff to take care of us in the meantime. We would go out and get food and bring it in cooked already and so on. Anyhow, and then we went back up to the house, actually. Now the road had been blockaded and would not allow people to go up to where we lived. And so we had to find little back roads to go up to the house, and we did, and we filled up the minivan with some other stuff just to make our lives easier, because now it became clear that we weren't sure when we were going to be able to come back home. So we filled it up with some stuff and to make our lives bearable down there in this totally empty house. And when we came back down, we're unloading the minivan, and lo and behold, the landlady shows up. Of course, she hasn't shown up for weeks and weeks, and she chooses that day to show up. But in any case, I explained to her that we had to evacuate, and we didn't know how long we'd have to stay, and would she allow us to do that. And once she heard we were evacuated, she was very nice about it. She said, of course, and so on. And, you know, everyone had, almost everyone in Jogja was trying to help people who were evacuated, so this was a common response in that kind of situation. So, as it turned out, we were evacuated for 18 days, and we went up to the house almost every day. Well, actually every day. I didn't always go up. Sometimes just Sunny and Mahfoud went up. But somebody went up to the house every day. There was no electricity. I don't know whether they turned the electricity off or whether transformers had blown. But in any case, there was no electricity. But I have a generator because living out in the countryside, the electricity goes off frequently. So some years ago, I bought a generator for those occasions. And so they would come up and they tried to clean. And cleaning that ash-sand combination was just horrific. Trying to get it off. You'd clean what you thought you did a good job, and you'd turn around and it looked like it was just as dirty as before. It was very, very difficult to get rid of this stuff. And so every day they'd go up, and every time they came back to the house we were living in during the evacuation, they would bring a minivan full of stuff to make our lives a little bit easier. And you know, we were actually very lucky. And I reminded myself of that almost every day, several times, because other people who were evacuated lost everything. They lost their homes, They lost all their precious possessions. They were living in camps. Not everybody lost their homes. Some homes were still standing, but most of them were totally destroyed. Not those of us who lived in this area where I live, but people who lived in what's considered the evacuation zone, the unsafe zone. So we were very, very lucky. But even so, every time I left my house, after coming up and cleaning and filling the van up and so forth, every time I left, it was a difficult, emotional thing for me, not knowing whether this was going to happen again, or whether Merapi was going to really blow even bigger. And would I ever see my things again? Would I ever see my precious photos and things like that? So it was a very emotional thing, even though I was really, really very, very lucky. And after 18 days, we came back up here, and this was the first time we brought the dogs. I said it's time for them to go home and run around in their yard and so forth. So we came up, and when we got up here, I said to Sonny, you know, we're staying. Let's just stay. Merapi had quieted down quite a bit. It was still blockaded. We weren't still allowed to come here, but I said, you know, let's stay. We've got the generator. If we have to run it 24 hours a day, I don't care. So we decided to stay. And so she went back down and got some more stuff from the house and started bringing stuff back up here. And then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the electricity came back on. So I must have had a sixth sense or something about the time being exactly right. And so we were lucky. We came home then, and we've been home ever since. But as I said, other people have not been able to go home. Even now, months later, they're still living somewhere else, and they don't have their homes. The government has done some very good things about replacing animals and that were lost and so on, but I think Rudy will tell you a little bit more about that. Anyhow, please come back next time, and Rudy's going to tell you what his experience was, because he didn't stay with us. He went off on his motorbike and was trying to help people who didn't have a vehicle or whatever, and so he's going to tell you a little bit about that next time. So thanks for listening. This has been Kate at IndonesianDiscovery.net.